I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying the weather getting better.
Okay, amazing. Me too. Right, so welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the beginning of a series for Cyber Salon podcast to go with our book, 22 Ideas About the Future. So delighted to have you on the podcast, and I've been following your thought leadership on AI for a while. So we're going to focus on AI, but just quick intro. So Jon is a very dear friend of mine. We've been sharing the tech adventures for a couple of decades now, and he's arrived to technology from music, developing zines originally on the web, and then moved to pioneer advertising on the web, including the first immersive and interactive ads for Levi. But then conclusion is that since then technology moved on, and particularly the last few months, things have moved on super fast. So it reminds me about the early days when we were setting up internet cafe, and every day something else was turning up,
Something new is happening.
Something new tech, and we were just really loving, enjoying it, and surfing the wave as tech was developing. So I have slight deja vu about the internet cafe time and now AI cafe time. So yes, I'm very intrigued to see what you think about it, because you obviously have been very much at the forefront of technology for a long time, and have very good grip both on tech and the creative and the brand and the commercial aspect of it. So it would be amazing to see what you think. What's your perception of the last few months, the speed, the direction, and where we're going to go?
Well, hopefully I have a brief presentation, which is actually not looking at the technology particularly. Well, it's obviously underpinned by the technology, but it's about actually using it for work. Hopefully it'll be reasonably informative, and then we can talk about it after. Okay.
Yeah, brilliant. Go on.
Text prompts and taking control. I think over the last few months, since ChatGPT launched, it's been quite an interesting time. Kind of want to start by actually saying that the idea, I know it's all very buzzy talking about AI, but this was the landscape a couple of years ago. This is like in 2021, and AI has been with us for a really long time. I mean, I studied it in 1989, right? So whilst it's very top of mind right now, it's been around. What's different, and the reason we seem to be in this buzzy world of all this is really down to OpenAI, in that it's all of a sudden become accessible to everyone in a way that it wasn't before, and very literally usable. So loads of sectors have been doing this stuff for ages, but now you can actually just open up the new Bing or go to the ChatGPT site.
So can I ask you a question? So when you say you studied in 1989, was it when you were doing your computer science degree?
I was studying computer science and artificial intelligence, actually.
Yeah, it's amazing.
At Edinburgh.
We must have met, not knowing that we will meet later, because I was doing a PhD in a user-computer interface, and Edinburgh was the place to be for artificial intelligence. But obviously that was at the stage of, Lisp and Prolog and what we were trying to model languages, so completely wrong approach, but it was definitely around. So this is not exactly a new path. It's just, as you said, it arrived to the point when it's usable.
Yeah, and I mean, Edinburgh Prolog is actually quite interesting, because that was the first thing I learned, a bit of Lisp. But back then it was a little bit of text and a little bit of imagery, image processing. There wasn't a whole lot else out there. Pardon me. So OpenAI, especially, I mean, next to that on the screen is IBM Watson. IBM Watson's been around for years, and people have had reasonable access to that. But it's really just the fact that people can start typing, and that's what.
Yeah, we had a project. We had a project with IBM Watson. One of our early Siberia cyber hosts, Zoe Kamper, has led on the first Watson chatbot for help on one of the charities. I think it was the either diabetes or Alzheimer, but basically they built with Watson. She led on this project with Watson, to provide chatbot to help people to signpost to treatments. But obviously the problem was that the chatbots were still very limited. So they still have it and they claimed the first. So Zoe did a great job. She's now in Las Vegas working on it for other charities, but it wasn't particularly competent in that directing. It just didn't have enough body of knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all evolutionary, evolutionary. And the thing when it comes to things like Watson, and especially when it comes to this, when we talk about things like war games, what made war games back in the 80s kind of revolutionary was the idea that you could type in something into a computer and get something back. That Turing test kind of experience. Now that chatbots have been around for a while. They've been improving, but really, that's what we're looking at today, is actually people being able to have that experience. And what I wanted to do was actually sort of apply it to their day job. And my day job, actually, for the most part, is when I'm not doing I don't know, non-execy type stuff, do brand development and brand evolution, because everything's digital now, so it's like fine. And starts with the whole idea. I mean, and this goes for almost all platform development. So from tech side, certainly all branding and marketing, you start by developing personas, right? You start by generating pen portraits of people. You start segmenting people, because there are too many people to be able to think about them individually. So we create buckets, we create boxes. And the idea behind these personas is to help generate empathy, so that you can actually start creating things and saying, would this be right for that kind of person? So I was in the middle of the project where I was having to, the very first step, doing that first bit, generating personas. You'd normally start with a combination of interviews, so qualitative type stuff. You'd have whatever data is available. In this case, it was all about professional services, so I had quite a reasonable amount of data to pick around with. But I wanted to see, okay, can I use GPT, and so this was specifically GPT, to actually help me do my day job? Now, I'm not going to go through the actual thing that I did, because it's obviously confidential, but I thought, as an academic exercise in a way, I'll try and create a persona, and I'm going to create it around a persona that I know a little bit about. So I thought I'd do me. I know that sounds incredibly narcissistic.
That's not a very good marketing segment. I don't think there's two of you in the whole market.
Well, I just thought I'll start with me, and because then it makes it easier to actually say, okay, how close is this getting to me, right? So I started out. The first prompt was, I put in my rules. I have a rule set, because I'm not religious. I have I make my own ethical and moral framework, and this is it. Communication can only occur between equals. You can't demand respect, but you can't command it. Beg for forgiveness, seek permission where at all possible, avoid liars and bullies, and be excellent to everyone, party on dude, from Bill and Ted's, of course. And so I just popped it into GPT and said, okay, what does it say? And it came up with, frankly, a bunch of shit, right? A bunch of crap. I look at this, and all it's doing is parroting back essentially what I was saying. I thought, okay.
What Emily Bender calls it, stochastic parrot, right?
Yeah, I mean it's awful. So I thought, okay, I need to ask more questions. So I said, look, can you order this make this a bit more useful? So it give me in terms of traits. So apparently I'm assertive, decisive, values-driven, sociable, and easygoing. That's, me well enough. Is that a fair comment? Assertive, I'm not sure about decisive, but I'm certainly values-driven and sociable.
Yeah,
I would say pretty easygoing.
That's pretty good. Yep, liking that.
Yeah. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and give it a teeny tiny bit of biographical. Just a little bit about biographical stuff. So, my name is Jon. I'm 51. I do brand strategy. I used to run a digital agency, and I did AI and computer science. What I didn't say earlier is I did drop out, because I dropped out to be a music journalist and DJ. I got busy doing that. So it basically came up with all this, which is the start, which is getting much closer to what a persona would actually look like. And so I kind of iterated through this a few times, and eventually it came up with, a reasonable approximation of me. And I thought, okay, now I've got that. I need some pictures, right? So I went to DALL-E and Stable Diffusion, being the easiest access ones, Midjourney still a bit of pain. But I said, create a picture of something that vaguely looks like me. So mixed race, picked one, yada yada yada. And so this was the first attempt. This was actually from Stable Diffusion. Thought, yeah, nah, that's not me. And this was from DALL-E. I thought, yeah, I like that. Apart from not having pecs, and
you
not
just need some cabling coming out of your ears. It should be a cyberpunk.
Yeah, it's a little bit Danny Trejo.
Yeah. Probably, yeah.
But so
it's getting there.
So I did. So kind of assembled it all, and you end up with the profile, right? So and what I was doing for real was actually saying, okay, what are motivations and all that sort of thing. That was actually what I was doing in the day job, and it helped out. It helped out a lot. So
what did you ask? Can I ask a question? So what did you ask to do to create motivations of person with the trait? Is that how you phrased it?
So what I had to do, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but what it did was I actually spent quite a lot of time training it in what I wanted it to tell me. What I actually, so I basically was giving it a bit of a schema on how I needed it to respond in order to get me to where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
So I guess it's what did I learn doing it? And this is purely from doing it on the job. And of course, I stuck this picture up, and this is one of my favorite TV shows, The Prisoner. And this was from an episode in 1967, 66, 67.
Yeah, I love that.
Which is all about, do you remember it?
Yeah.
It's where they basically, they've got the general, and it has this speed learning thing. And I'd say that this is the only picture I actually stole from somewhere, because I thought it was quite a good one. Everything else is generated. So first off, when I first started playing around, I have to say this back in, I don't know, November, I was probably like most people. It's just that you spend most of your time trying to break GPT, trying to ask it stupid questions and things like that. It takes a minute to actually get into actually using it to get something constructive out of it. So it's very easy to get into, but it's much harder to actually get things good out of it. If you put nothing in at all, if you don't provide any additional data, right, or if you don't tell it what good looks like, you will get garbage out. Right? It's absolutely, you end up with bland, generic nastiness, right? That's essential, it's essentially messing around. And obviously the reason for that is that there is no intelligence there. There is no intelligent life there. It's not actually analyzing anything. It is, you hear the term glorified autocorrect, and that's what it is. So you really need to spend the time to actually ask it to do what you want it to do. Everything it comes out with a lot, and it's quite interesting, because what I found when I was doing it is that it actually exhausted me while I was doing this project, because my brain had to be on 100%, or at least as much as my brain can be on, full time. So whilst it's coming up with words, I'm having to actually analyze the words a lot more than if I was actually writing them myself. Right? Because
you're filtering for integrity, for robustness, for does it agree with itself? Because I notice it often doesn't agree within itself, so you have to be really careful.
Yeah, and which is the next point, which is actually you cannot trust what it comes out with, right? If you do not spend the time looking at it and looking at the thing. And look, I was doing personas, but I was also asking questions about industries and things like that. And when I went and verified simply by Googling some stuff, right, discovered that it was talking nonsense, or I found a white paper that completely contradicted it. And it comes back to this phrase that, and Eva, you'll know about this. It's where we talk about hallucinations, right? That AIs are hallucinating, and the idea of hallucinations is where it very confidently talks nonsense, and the more you speak to GPT, and it's especially bad with Bing, or it was, that it eventually it goes into nothingness. And one of the things that I had to learn actually doing this was, if you know that after 10 questions in GPT, you start getting garbage out, what I found was that every prompt that I put in, I would copy and paste it into, I know, Evernote or something, so that I could actually just copy it and paste it back, start again and say, okay, this is what I told you before. Now let's stop you from hallucinating. When I was doing this presentation originally, I was talking to a very mixed audience, and I tried to describe how these hallucinations happen and what it is. And I came up with this, and this is, me, I'm a geek, film geek. And so I thought I actually found a good example. There wasn't how, right? Actually, just on how. There's a great scene in 2010 and the question is, so Bob Balaban plays Chandra, who created Hal, is asked, why did Hal break down? And he replies, Hal was told to lie, right? Hal was instructed to lie. And because he doesn't know how to lie, he can function. He became paranoid. I found another example, which is this. RoboCop 2, which is, I have to say, wasn't very good, but written by the amazing Frank Miller. There was a bit where essentially in an attempt to restrain RoboCop, they crowdsourced his rules, and you ended up with, instead of these very simple rules, you ended up with a ridiculous list of rules, which had things like participate in group activities, avoid interpersonal conflicts, discourage harsh language, don't walk across a ballroom floor swinging your arms, right? And
that's very important.
Very important from the film. Yeah. And one of the best ones is avoid Orion meetings, and Orion, of course, were the people who made the RoboCop films in the first place. Now, it's a very good example of where what's happening is that with the training data. So when you train these AIs, they then have to put a layer of rules set on top of them to actually keep it real. And the more and more of these rules that you put in.
On that topic, I've seen something hilarious yesterday. I was on this prompt engineering workshop, which we ran in the Newspeak House. And one guy got so annoyed with this moderation that he attempted to break it. So he wrote like a layer on top of ChatGPT, but made it into argumentative ChatGPT. So whatever you put it says, are you sure you want it? That's a really silly idea. Yeah. That's hilarious, but you can do it. You can
which neatly brings to my next point, actually, because it is a rabbit hole when you start going down it. And I found myself doing similar things, Eva. I mean, once you actually start playing with this stuff, you do start trying to catch it out. You do start trying to make it do things it's not supposed to. And I described it like a therapy session, right? And it can be quite time consuming if you're not quite focused. So you have to remind yourself that you're actually doing a job here. One of the things, and this is like the only literary sort of example, is do you know Plato's cave allegory?
Yeah.
That's the idea where you have a bunch of people living in a cave, and all they can see is the shadows of people on the outside, sort of reflecting in. So, as far as they're concerned, the world are these silhouettes, right? That's the entire world. It's just the shadows from people on the outside. So their view of the world isn't really what's true, and it's been used to describe social media before. A fantastic TV show called Legion. If you haven't watched it, watch it. But that's what these certainly the generative systems like this they are looking at the shadows of us. And the other thing to remember is it's also, especially with GPT right now, it's everything everywhere, but not all the time. It's once upon a time. The training data for GPT core is from 2021, right? So it's already 2 years out of date. Bing introduced the idea of pulling in live data, when they brought it to market. And as a result, it started hallucinating a lot quicker and went completely nuts, right down to the examples of it threatening users and all that. It couldn't do it because it's pulling in live data, it hasn't been properly trained. And so what their solution was not to try and find a solution to it. They just limited the number of questions you can ask so it doesn't go nuts. Now, there isn't actually a solution to this. I mean, have you, Eva? I don't know. I mean, there isn't a solution to this hallucinating problem. The AI, the papers I've read on it said, well, we know what happens, but we're not entirely sure why. All right, we've got clues, but we don't know exactly why. So Bing's solution of just limiting it to 5, it's a workaround. It's not a solution.
Yeah, unfortunately, like with every system, there is a level of side effect that occurs, which is complexity. Even if you have very straightforward integrated systems in business, in retail, my world, you start adding layers, you start adding middleware, you start adding an app here and up there. And suddenly you get some weird glitch that starts from one app and goes through every layer to the end, and you end up with complete havoc. Yeah. And I spent a week trying to unbundle it. So it's an outcome of complication, because when it was, little system in the core, that was fine. But now they're checking more and more to it. It's getting more complicated. But, I think people are trying to solve it. There is something called LangChain, which just came out, and it's basically trying to concentrate your ability to input sections and ask us to work only on those sections. So you enter body of knowledge that you want to enter and just work on that. So retaining the tool, retaining the probabilistic, the stochastic parrot function, but giving it less to roam. And for specialized applications, that's an interesting one. But yeah, sorry, come on.
Yeah. So apart from the fact it's a few years old, the other thing that I was thinking about while I was doing all this stuff, and sorry, spoiler, Soylent Green is made of people. And so the training data. And so we have basically, from a regulatory framework, it was hard enough when we were worried about people scraping all the data and now putting it into the machines. The privacy starts becoming, yet again, where does this stuff come from? How is intellectual property managed? When I presented this originally, there was a significant chunk of the audience were lawyers. All right, so there's huge questions about where intellectual property comes from, plagiarism, and all that. As it's scraping personal data at the same time, it can't tell the difference. There's just all sorts of issues that are going to come around this. And the other interesting thing I had to read up on it, and I don't know if you read the Epoch think tank report at the end of last year, is that because it's coming from, it needs to use high quality data, that they're based on their math. They reckon that we'll run out of high quality data in about 2026.
Well, it might run out quicker because people smarten up and started blocking crawlers. So I've seen that on, we did a lot of work with VR with different platforms. And the biggest concern of the creators is that they don't really want AI crawlers to start picking up on the files and taking that into the bin of, Mid-Journey or Stable Diffusion. So people started putting prompts, no AI, and platforms like all the biotech, for example, they are now closed. So the free for all is finished already. So they might run out of sources of verifiable sources pretty quickly.
Yeah, and so that's it's an it's one to watch. I mean, in a nutshell, though, I think these things will only get better. Right? We're watching the arms race right now. Currently between Microsoft and Google and and Meta to an extent, although they haven't really come out of the gate yet. And it does actually ask these questions as well around the monopolization of data. That in order to do these things, the algorithm's relatively straightforward, but you need a lot of data to actually make them terribly useful. So that's going to be another, another thing, and it goes right back to where it's going to be used. Well, I think, and I don't know, the phrase, if you're not paying for it, then you're the product. I think this brings another layer of that, that old adage when it came to social media. I think we're going to have that term come up again. The other thing is, I guess, around the environmental concerns around the rapid rise. Whilst we're not at Moore's law yet, in terms of like they haven't really got Moore's law for AI, but with Moore's law, when they stopped running out of how to talk about transistors and speed and things like that, they talked about environmental impact. That things got better as time went on. At the moment, the environmental impact of AI is just getting worse and worse and worse. So it's going to take I think that I can imagine that will come up. And just my very last point was actually, or my last couple was as I was going through this thinking, okay, am I about to be replaced? Because it's doing all this stuff. And actually, no, you know what? Not really, because it took quite a lot of time to train it. I came up with most of the ideas to put in and got it to rewrite stuff. So it was, what it was doing was it was really helpful, and I definitely got things done quicker. But it was probably 80% me and 20% it. And that was brilliant. I felt superhuman as a result. And it does end the question, though, about, which is the place to end, which is, as a tool for an individual, it's great, really great. For an institutional level and a jobs level, where are we going to be at? Because some of these jobs, this will and is having direct effect on what's going to come next. And, if you're in accounting, actually, it's a good one. The example I heard the other day, I haven't even thought of, was medical radiologists. A radiologist now that you can put pictures in and say, yeah, you got cancer or not. There's all sorts of that kind of thing. But I can't see it going away. Sorry, I can't see it changing that quickly. In the same way the web didn't change us that quickly. It took a bit of time and people retrained along the way.
Yeah, I think the web has created more jobs than it took. So like generally, I'm with you, I'm not that worried. This is really great because it's picking up sort of the key themes in a way that contextualizes for every day, which ultimately is what will make it live or die. Because if it hallucinates too much, people won't pay attention. If it gets better, it might get more expensive, because the reason why they're not really charging for it quite yet is because it's a bit rubbish. But the second it will get better, it will be a big price to pay on it. Brilliant. Okay, so I've got just a few questions to follow it up. So so you took the take, your approach from the point of view how it can take, how it can assist in developing UX, in developing user journey, in developing better digital experience. And I think that's fantastic because, we've been at it for how many years? Like decades. And every time I go on NatWest website or insurance website or government websites, for all the talent that is in these teams, and I, take my hat to them, because it's very hard to design anything in these large environments, but it's still a killer. It's still, wrong. It's very frustrating. It's very difficult on accessibility. Anytime I try to get my mother-in-law to do anything online, just impossible. Anybody over 65, no problem. So, we absolutely need that tool for the teams that might not have UX people on the team, but do need to deliver good online experience, and to the teams that are specifically briefed with, accessibility, with solving that journey in an extra easy way, which, I see that in charities. You deal with people who are not just basic users, they are the very beginner users often, and there is still about 8% of UK it's not able to do online banking.
One of the things also I sort of clocked quite quickly, and this is as I was generating them, if you don't specify UK, if you don't specify a country, if you don't, you end up with generic American, because that's where the bulk of the data is coming from. Yeah. And the thing is, when you're looking at traits and you're looking at people, I'm sorry, people do behave differently around the world. We aren't actually the same. Somebody in Idaho, right, behaves differently than somebody in Birmingham. I would hope, right? And
it doesn't have that layer because it's white bros. But I think that that is a relatively low level. If people are aware of it, you can introduce body of knowledge that will. I'll tell you the example. We work on Newspeak with various cross-party political workshops on how to use AI for politics better. Because obviously a number of parties have very advanced tools on tech and segmentation, and a number of parties don't. So we're looking to provide some sort of level playing field that people can access when they're designing the campaigns, when they're designing the online interactions. And one thing the ChatGPT is absolutely brilliant. It's teaching people about propaganda. So I worked on it with Esther Piria and Hannah O'Rourke, who are fantastic people. They run this campaign lab workshop. And we thought, how can we show people the level of how propaganda is constructed? So we chucked into chat, in the style of Nigel Farage, write an argument for pedestrianization of the cities, write an argument for making cities not car friendly, because he's going around yapping about oh my God, we're taking my liberties away. So it was fantastic. It wrote a fantastic rally speech about take back control of fresh air, take back democracy in towns. We want our children to breathe fresh air. And it basically picked all the phraseology, all the little propaganda lines that Nigel is using,
all the bits,
put it in the opposite argument. And, we just highlighted it in yellow and you gave it to activists, and people can use that because it's so clear how he constructs the argument. So for that, I think it's amazing because it has obviously the body of knowledge of, right-wing speeches of this sort of take back control crowd and how they construct the speeches.
Have you tried Bing celebrity chat yet? Have you come across that? So if you type in the Bing, tell me about Bing celebrity chat, and it comes back with a response, and it says, "Would you like to try it?" But yeah, okay. And it then says, "All right, who do you want to talk to?" And so if you type in Donald Trump, you will be talking to Donald Trump. If you type Taylor Swift, you'll be talking to Taylor Swift.
I think it's fantastic because it's to show people how people construct language, and obviously for fun is great, but if you can deconstruct and show
it's scary.
The absurdity of propaganda, that is a big win for me, because that's a hard thing to do without it, particularly if you're talking to 5G mass conspiracy theorists, it's hard to get them off that particular racket. But if you show them how the language is used to persuade them about, something that's green is actually blue, they respond. And the other thing that I was very excited about was, all that work about, as you said, the language. So somebody wrote, Dan Kwiatkowski, who is a great AI artist, I think. He just gets chat to do really wacky stuff. And he wrote a rap battle. So basically he wrote a tool on top of chat that you can enter, say, Jeremy Corbyn versus Boris Johnson, and argue about something. And it does it in a rappy rhyme. And again, it's a great tool for activists to show, in a nutshell, what is the difference in position, but you can ask it to argue the opposite positions. So it basically like surfacing and revealing how we use the language, which, takes you 10 minutes versus 10-hour workshop. So I think for the ethics people, all that education stuff is really handy.
I mean, I find it fascinating because it's like, it's the mundane things that actually are the superhuman bits. Right. So when you talk about speech writing, it essentially is you can program it, you can train it. That a lot of this stuff is going to be so hidden, right? And I think that's what's fascinating about it, because to me it was the mundane stuff. It was actually just give me a list of X, right, and I had X to work with, and then I iterate through it. And it's not sexy. I mean, I'm just doing, boring day job stuff. I'm just doing it better. But as I say, when you apply it to propaganda, and bear in mind, I mean, marketing. What is marketing but propaganda? Sorry, it's you're trying to change people's minds.
Can I ask a separate question? So, we're doing this work in UK at the moment on the digital pound, on the CBDCs, and it's quite early days, but it is quite complicated in as much as different types of digital pound might be implemented, from fully anonymous to not anonymous at all to middle anonymous. So I can imagine, and even the cities like Manchester with Andy Burnham, they're doing Manchester pound, digital pound. Bristol has already got Bristol local currency, which they're digitizing at the moment. So we are kind of wandering into the multi-currency environment. And I've got a few questions about what do you think about AI can help? Because like I'm totally loyalty points girl. I've got like every card known to man. But so, I've got my American Express, I've got Waitrose, I've got Tesco, I've got whatever I can gather because I just like loyalties. But the problem is that they are not often, well, mostly they're not interoperable. And I always have a problem, like, what do I pay here to get the best of it? So it takes space in my head. So in this book that we mentioned, 22 Ideas, there was a story by Paul Curion, who was a delightful writer, and I absolutely recommend him. The story titled The Money Talk. And he invented this little bot that, money bot, that basically you don't even get involved in these decisions. It just tells you, okay, we're doing shopping here, use this. Or in the next generation, it doesn't even tell you, it just uses the right currency in your digital currency to complete the transaction. And I thought like, yeah, why don't I have one now? So, could the next generation of AI help with money? Because ultimately, that's what people will care about. Does it make your life cheaper? Can they optimize something? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of big questions there, because I mean, when you're talking about something like the Manchester pound or the Brixton pound, which has obviously been around for quite a long time, and I'm sure you've done a lot more thought about this than I have. It's why do you need these currencies? What's the benefit to the local area? Why take it down? And the idea of actually having, and I know a bit about the Brixton pound. It was essentially a barter process within it, so that it had benefits to the local community. That's what you'd hope. So what you think is actually it brings community together and there's something to rally around. So it's geographically based as opposed to general currency being currency. Better chatbots to be able to explain how you were saying about your mother not being able to access online banking. It's all part of the same story, isn't it? As opposed to a revolutionary thing. I think the concept of the currency is probably more interesting.
Yeah, I think the local currencies, they're becoming viable because you don't need to pay Visa to clear your payments. You can run your own clearing system. So, the money that we all pay to Visa, to MasterCard, that is money we shouldn't need to pay anymore. We can clear it in a different way now. So there is a bit of saving to open now. But just coming back to the brands, because that's kind of the space you were following and how the brands can use AI. So I guess the question is, when you look at the workflow that you were examining, so you can get ChatGPT to generate text for you. So let's say copy for campaign. You can get Midjourney to generate images. You can get music or to write your jingle. You can get another tool to make your automated video. So what makes me think is that, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love that because, it all takes forever and sometimes it's quicker just to do AI. But it does bring the question, at the moment, the big brands still have an advantage because they have the teams that can do that and can do that well. But with this bunch of tools, and there's a new tool called Algovera, which allows to glue together all these different modalities into one workflow. And it really becomes quite easy to generate like really good content really quickly. So then you have all this army of creators who are getting this incredibly democratizing tool into their posts and can create really sexy, fascinating, entertaining stuff that probably competes pretty damn well with big brands. So then it kind of begs the question, what is the point of big brands anymore if they cannot compete on creative output. So if I can do as good as Nike art within, you know, an hour a day, as opposed to having a huge team and 70 million, I probably can go and get my own line of trainers and make them sustainable and source them from a good place in a decent price. So where do we go? Will it change the ecosystem of brands and commercial environment?
I think that AI is actually already, I mean, you know, has already changed significant swathes of it, simply by the move from brand marketing, i.e. the kind of Levi's stuff that, you know, PBH used to do a big TV ad and it's all about Levi's is cool. Shifting it through to performance marketing, which really was about Google and zero moment of truth, and I'm only interested in a click or a conversion, right? So you're in retail, you know what I'm talking about. So the whole basic nature of brand has actually fundamentally changed over the last 20 odd years. The marketing automation platforms have been around for decades now. So a lot of this stuff was automated even before. Which does take bits out. When it comes to
but the production wasn't. So, you know, to create a really good TV ad and a video that's decent with good production value.
Okay, maybe. Yeah, maybe not to the extent. Yeah, sorry, maybe not to the extent of actually doing full motion video, and that was written by a machine and all that, and that's true. But when it came to things like, well, what's the best headline for your email? That kind of stuff, or what do I need to stick in a banner and all that? These things have been around. Does this fundamentally change what brands are about? I think it forces people in the same way. If you remember back to No Logo, when you know there was a big question about what's the basic nature of brands and how are they going to move forward. We may be hitting another inflection point like that, and it will be about actually what.
Can you explain that? That's it. That's a very interesting point.
Well, basically, what No Logo was saying, and it sort of to be really, really top line, because it's been a long time since I read it. But it was actually about it was very. Well, you'll probably
we teach it with the marketing courses in Middlesex University. It's like a core book for me.
Yeah. Ultimately, you know, in a nutshell, it's about why should you trust these big corporations? Why should you trust these brands? And that thought has been ongoing for a long time, but it really came to fore at the end of the 90s. And I think now, and actually looking at the last 20 years, what are the things that engage consumers, especially young consumers? What's their sustainability record? Is a big one. Does that make a fundamental differentiation? How are people represented? And brands always fall behind on this, right? It's like you can talk about Dove's campaign for natural beauty, and that was a really long time ago. But now we're living in a world where actually they can't get away with size zeros anymore. They can't get away with homogenous white. And so
that's a very good point. But that's the point which was thought by the consumer. The change in the industry from having zero size models only came because people got Instagram in their hands and they could voice that they had issues with that. Brands would not changed of their own bat. It was driven by the rebellion by consumers. And I work with a lot of brands that were absolutely zero size models. Anything more than size 6 was just unthinkable. But now you can do that because you consume your audience, your customers say, where is your representation? Where is your inclusivity? So the brands I work with, on lingerie, they put pictures of beautiful girls who have stretch marks, who have natural real body, and people love it. But that was possible because consumer understands that. It's very difficult to battle on the sustainability ground because in one pair of trainers you have about 20 plastics. People don't quite understand that. It's very difficult to campaign on sustainability. So maybe AI and provenance will do better. But the visual, that battle is being fought quite well because the consumer is easy to explain, easy to understand, easy to object.
Yeah, but this is why big brands do things like personas. They'll do the They do the research. They understand what consumer behavior is like. They understand what consumer behavior is going to be. That you know that so the brands are the mirror, are the of, you know, if they intend to stay valid, or you know, they have to actually reflect what's going on in society at that time, and that changes all the time. What you want is a solid undercurrent of what brands stand for. And one of the words that I think is going to come up again and again actually is Levi's always had their 7 brand values. One of them was authentic. And I think authenticity is actually going to be a trait that people are going to start valuing more and more, as we look at things like, you know, the TikTok glamour filter that came out recently, one that basically makes you look gorgeous, and then the whole no filter movement, right, which has been kicking around. This transition from millennial, centennial, and narcissism to collective, you know, value and all that. It's nothing stays the same right now. I think centennials are probably in a better place mentally, in terms of understanding, and they're in a worse place mentally because, oh my God, the world's turning to shit, right, on somebody else's watch. So I think you know, the modern brands will keep an eye on that.
Can I on that topic? So we've got like 5 minutes left. So can I ask you a question? So do you think AI and the current incarnation of it, so open AI, ChatGPT, Middle Journey, do you think they belong into the dystopian or to the utopian framework for the future?
As with everything, and come on, you know this, it's all it's a tool. It's how you use it. It can be both. I would love to say that I think it's going to be used for good. I suspect it's not. I am very conscious of us liberal lefty types in the early 90s thinking about the democratization of communication, how great it's going to be, and the changing the zeitgeist, and everything is awesome. And you know, ... You know, we walked straight into that one. So do I think it's going to be all good now? No, I think there's going to be I think it's going to be pretty grim. I think I think the unintended consequences of this will be there. I mean, it kind of goes back to, do you remember the gag was, say, if you wanted to see where the state of the web was, you looked at the porn industry back at, you know, go right back to 95. Right? The porn industry. Still
valid point.
Yeah, porn industry did more innovation than anybody else. They were the first ones doing pop-ups. They were the first ones doing e-com. I
guess betting and gambling are up there as well. So
and so now you've got the issues around deepfake pornography, all this just sort of stuff. There's just so much going on around there. I mean, if anything, they've got a missing industry because of all this. Because you don't need to create new stuff, you can just recycle old. But I think between what they did then and then what Steve Bannon did around Warcraft, which I personally was quite offended by, as somebody who was playing multi-user games, especially Warcraft, and he built his entire theory about divisiveness and populism around that game. Right, so he was just taking what was going on in a game and then applied it to the real world. That's his talk. So no, this will, a lot of this will be
more of the usual, more battles to come, but we shall be solving problems and mitigating as we go along. But that's, for me as a futurist, that's a very pertinent question, because I was born in Poland and brought up under communism. So I'm kind of genetically predisposed to look for utopias, despite the fact that I know very well, people really don't like utopias. When they get it, they try to break it. Human nature, sunny uplands. Now, if we get to any sunny uplands, we break it immediately and create black market around it, and stratify ourselves into who is the strongest and who is the weakest. It's just human nature. So maybe the whole thing is about rephrasing that the future will never be utopian. It will never be sunny uplands, because we won't like that. We like conflict, we like competition, we like occasional little war. That's just the nature of humanity. So the best we can do is to acknowledge that, embrace that, and just look for tools which help us to solve the problems and help us to put conflict resolution in place, as opposed to hoping for something that suddenly will get re-engineered, unless we will get re-engineered with CRISPR and taking the aggression gene out of our composition. That's a separate question. But if we stay as we are, the sunny uplands, not worth destination, because
it's all there. I mean, the one thing that I'm conscious of, and I think it's people like us who actually who are interested in tech the whole time, right? Just as long as there has been, is there's a level of curiosity that comes out of it. So I've never been afraid of tech, right? I'm just curious, right? And we talk about AR and VR and talk about that, it's unlikely that folk like
I think I think your comment on our role in it has to be, both as cyber salon, individually, and our day jobs, is to pay attention, because your comment about the fact that if you don't specify, you will get a generic American, and you probably will get a generic American male, and you probably get generic American white male. You probably get generic American white male living somewhere between San Francisco and Palo Alto, age about 32, right? So spotting those, it's very key, and it's hard to spot unless you look, because it's not obvious. So I think our job is probably spotting things and making noise about those that can be defined. And so, even in Mid-Journey, infuriating, because unless you specify no big breasts, you will get a girl with big breasts out of default. So
I think that maintaining that curiosity and wariness, right? But and just really keeping the critical thinking bit. I mean, I think that you could quite easily do a cyber salon event just actually saying, okay, what are the ways that AI is going to destroy the world? Right? How can we think of bad ways to use this tech? And the problem is that there's loads, right? There's loads. What did we miss? What did we miss now? When you got Elon Musk saying, "Oh my God, this is absolutely terrible," and we haven't even talked about artificial general intelligence. But I think I've always thought that knowing how bad things can get, and this goes for all startups I've ever worked with, it's understanding risk. If you understand what the risks are, then you can do something to mitigate it, right? If you don't start with them.
Absolutely. I think it's about identifying the risks and mitigating as you go along, and sort of, correcting the trajectory. My family comes from merchants, leather merchants. So my great-grandfather was selling leather for saddlers, and even my grandfather was still selling leather for saddlers and shoemakers. And then suddenly there were no more horses, and shoes became industrialized. So they changed tack and became merchants of something else. But it was a painful transition, and you just have to flow with it. And they luckily did.
Wasn't that the story behind? Wasn't that the story behind the Model T that it put all the horsewhip makers out of business? Right. And I remember that as people stopped using horses, people made horsewhips. And the thing is that when you look at desktop,
I know few industries that still use plenty of whips, so they haven't quite disappeared.
Okay,
but that's
things like we've gone from a white collar perspective. We've been through this with AI. With desktop publishing and just publishing in general, right? And that was living memory. From hot metal to PostScript to laser printers to all that. That was just 80s.
Yes, we have someone in our cyber salon team who has done printing, before Whopping, like Fabian, that team, they were still doing the old way. But he transited really well to being Wikipedia master. So he's still publishing, it's just in different ways. Once a publisher, always a publisher, as he says. Okay, brilliant. So just to finish off, so Jon, so you're generally a slightly pessimistic, but with a tinge of humans are humans, and we will carry on. We just have to try to be critical thinkers and pick up holes as we go along and correct trajectories.
And embrace the good stuff. I mean, the things I said, there will be troubles ahead, but right now, I'm enjoying being a little bit more superhuman, or not more superhuman, being superhuman. Because I can do what I do better, quicker, I'm certainly learning more than I've done in ages. And I think there's a whole conversation, and this is one for you to do, which is around education, because I think that's huge benefits in AI and education.
Yes, exactly. So as long as we take, when you look at superhuman, but still stick to human, and look at all the benefits that we can use AI for education and for making better websites, more accessible digital journeys, that would be a massive win. So on that note, thank you so much, Jon. It was absolutely fantastic.
Cool.
I love talking to you, and I'm very grateful that people like you are paying attention, because that's what we need.